Hello and welcome back to the Stacey West YouTube channel for the final time of 2023. In fact, some of you may even be watching this next year if you don't really fancy spending your New Year's Eve afternoon or evening watching me or Chris, but why wouldn't you? I already alluded to it there. I am, of course, joined by Mr. Lamming himself for this edition of the monthly show. How are we doing, Chris?
Hello, mate. Yeah, very well indeed. Very well indeed. I can't believe it's 2024 or almost 2024. Time it's like it was summertime. We've blinked, and it's next year now. And yet, a lot has happened in the last month for us to discuss about Lincoln City Football Club. So it's time. Time is a strange phenomenon, isn't it?
It really, really is. And you know what? The months of the year are very much just split up for me because of recording this monthly show. And you know what? It'll be really interesting, actually, at the end of the year to just go back and look through some of the things we spoke about in August, September, October, November, and obviously now and later on in the season as well, just to see quite how much has changed, because I think there's going to have been quite a few different things to discuss. Won't there, Chris? It's not necessarily been the best month of football for the Imps, and I think that's probably where we'll go straight into the results of December. And here we are then, yes, on the screen you can see the results. No victories, Chris. 2 points from a possible 15. I've only got the league games in here, by the way. I'm aware we played Accrington in the Papa Johns, but well, to be honest, I totally forgot, and it was going to be an awkward for me to go back and replace it. So I just ignored it. So we're doing league only, although it doesn't exactly make for a better reading, does it?
Obviously, in terms of points return, it doesn't. And I think the fact that we're 3 games on a 3-game losing run now maybe just tarnishes a little of some of the silver lining maybe that we can gain from some of these games. I seem to remember the Wigan game particularly here. I was really impressed with the Wigan game. I thought we were superb, and particularly out of possession. And it absolutely baffles me, by the way, how people can't pay attention to what happens when your team hasn't got the ball. Maybe I'm weird. Maybe I'm weird. I'm the weird one, but I just can't not pay attention to that. I feel like you're missing out so much of football if you don't see that side of the game. And it was without the ball that we were absolutely superb against Wigan, and we weren't far away from nicking it. Our XG in that game was significantly higher than theirs. They only had 0.2 in the whole game. I didn't have a single shot on target. We really restricted them to that because we stifled them out of possession, but also I thought we were really good on the ball. It was probably the game this season that we were the best on the ball that we've been under Michael Skubala. So yeah, I thought there was some real positives to get from Wigan, and I think playing against a really good team, playing against a footballing team, we know how to set up against them and certainly to stifle them. We all know that we lack a little bit in the final third. You know, it's taken 3 minutes, 20 seconds for us to mention we haven't got strikers this time, but we're going to discuss that in a bit more depth later, aren't we?
Yeah.
But I think certainly in those first 2/3 of the pitch, particularly against Wigan, I thought we were absolutely superb. I really, really did. Reading, of course, was maybe a little bit opposite to that, to be honest. It felt that we hadn't really taken a step forward. Reading probably on the day deserved to win it, I think. I think they were certainly the more threatening. We really struggled to deal with their wide players, which forced our wing backs deeper. And we couldn't get out. We couldn't really get any sort of cohesive play in that game. And then that brings us on to Derby, where we lost 3-1 to 2 goals that are offside in a game that I thought we were pretty good in, to be honest. On the whole, we obviously analyse these in depth during the podcast and we go into super depth. But I think just look at it as a bit of a snapshot. There are 2 goals that are offside. Again, XG was ours was stronger than theirs, of course, albeit one was from a penalty. But I think Derby deserved to win, but I don't think they deserved to win as convincingly as they did. Bolton, we were so close to nicking something, albeit losing to the better team. And against Northampton, again, by the red card, I felt we deserved something from the game. So, yeah, we're not a million miles away. Results aren't great. but I really don't think they're a million miles away. And I think that people are going to think I'm starting to go mad just trying to see the silver lining in things. But I really just do feel that looking at that bigger picture, we're okay. We know what the challenges are. We know what's wrong, but we also know how to fix them. And I think that's the important part. But of course, 2 points from a possible 15 is not ideal. I think I predicted 7 or 8 when I looked at this first time round. So of course, miles away with predictions there. So yeah, it's not good reading in terms of results, but I think there's enough to gain from this to see that we still know what we can do moving forward. Of course, we've got a couple of more players missing now, which is going to make it really difficult moving into January.
No, absolutely. And look, I'm going to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate because, you know, we speak a lot sort of off camera as well, don't we, Chris? And I think we very much have a similar opinion in terms of the overall picture of Lincoln City at the minute. You know, we are sat upper mid-table in League One with all of the reasons that we can sit back. I actually think we're in a really good position overall, and there is very much light at the end of the tunnel, even though it isn't just a straight tunnel. And I think that's sort of something I said to you last night. You know, there are winds in the road, but there is still light coming from the end of the tunnel, and that's the thing. But on the flip side of that, December not been good enough. It is as simple as that. And realistically, we have been quite poor in some of those matches. We have given away. I think first of all, you know, Bolton, we gave away a point. We did. You know, we should have got the point, and we didn't. Northampton again. You know, I don't think it was amazing. Derby, I was very frustrated with and deflated coming out of it because actually I thought there were certain points in that game where we could have gone on to either get a point or even get a victory. Unfortunately, they just beat us on quality at certain points. Like I say, 2 offside goals. One of them definitely was. I still haven't seen the right angle to prove that the other one isn't, because I think Sorensen and Mitchell are both off camera. So I don't ever want to say that one was offside, purely because I'm not 100% sure. Reading again. If the Reading game for me was in a month where we were performing well and it was just a bit of a one-off, then I think fair enough, because those sorts of games happen. But I also just think that Reading, again, it was quite poor. We were lucky to get a good point in the grand scheme of things, so we're happy enough with that. Wigan away, we matched a strong Wigan side. Minus their 8-point deduction going into that match, they would have been joint with us on points. They would have had a slightly better goal difference. It was one of those games where actually it very much looked like an 11th versus 12th sort of game, or a 9th versus 10th, whatever the positions would have been at the time. It was very much 2 teams that were only separated by goal difference. I think so therefore we, for me, played well against Wigan. I just think, on the whole, I understand people's frustration, and I get that it's not necessarily been good enough, but I also think there are reasons why, when you kind of sit back and we look bigger picture. And people don't want to use excuses, and I don't. I hate using excuses in football, but I'm more than happy to use explanations. There's explanations as to why things have been the way they are. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's fine and we're happy with it, and the club are just going to want us to continue like that for the rest of the season, and we'll just trot along and get whatever position. No, there's obviously an ambition there. And I think it's something that's very much going to get sorted in the short term, but also the long term. I don't think we're going to get playoffs this season, funnily enough, but I think that's okay. Because going into the season, as much as kind of I was very much kind of hoping, can we sneak into the top 6 and all of this? Actually, at the end of the day, last season, we finished 11th place on a 0 goal difference. This season, all I wanted was 10th or higher with a positive goal difference. So all I wanted from this season. Now, whether or not we're going to get that, time will tell. But from what I do believe, we have still got a positive goal difference in the league as well at the minute. So the fact, we're looking at that as a position, it's really not that bad on the grand scheme of things, even though I very much understand frustrations on a game-by-game basis, because there are holes there, but it's not necessarily the fault of any 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 individuals.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think I generally try and see the light at the end of the tunnel more than maybe live in the moment sometimes, and maybe that does warp my opinion a little bit. But I agree with you in that points return isn't good enough. We can't continue picking up 2 points out of a possible 15 for the rest of the season. Obviously, no team can do that and expect to have a successful season. So there's no denying that the results need to improve. But in each of these games, we haven't been battered. But Bolton, in fairness, like in terms of the balance of the play, Bolton did batter us. I think we battled hard, but they battered us. But on the whole, that they're tight games. You know, we're not a million miles away. And I think that's where my positivity comes from. But you're absolutely right. Results obviously need to improve, and it's so hard when you're in a bit of a rut and you feel like it's so hard to get that win. But when it comes, of course, we're going to win another game in the next month. We absolutely are. Particularly with players coming back and what we perceive to be some positive changes upcoming. I can't see us having another month with results like this. I can't see us getting a lot out of Blackpool personally. We'll discuss that in a moment. But I think later in the month, we're gonna pick up some points. When you get that win on the board after being on a bad run, it just lifts you. It lifts so much pressure, and it's just a massive sense of relief. Like in the changing, you like we'll all feel it as fans as well, but you won't believe how much a difference, how big results affect mentality. It's massive. So yeah, I think the fact we haven't been outplayed by anybody really, we haven't been blown away by anybody, is something to kind of take from this. I think ironically that the game that we actually performed the worst in was Reading out of these 5, and that's when we actually picked up one of our 2 points. But ultimately, it's not good enough in terms of results. But I think, like you say, is explanations behind the deficiencies in the squad and the performances. And we know full well that the club are looking to address that in January. And there's no denying that we need to. January is a massive, massive month for this football club. Not massive in terms of making sure we stay up, but just massive in terms of making sure we keep moving forwards and we don't just stagnate. But ultimately, I think we're in a moment of change, aren't we? We're stepping away from a style of play into a new one. And I think this is just like a bit of a side note here, by the way. I don't know if you agree with this. Because I've been reading a lot about people kind of thinking, we're recruited for a certain style of play and now we're trying to play a different one. I think what's worth bearing in mind is that Mark Kennedy didn't join Lincoln City with the intention of playing the style of play that he ended up playing the majority of his time here. Prior to Bristol Rovers last season, we were pretty open, we were pretty front foot, we were pretty aggressive, reasonably possession based. Certainly, we were more attacking, and then we won 6-3 in a game that was like a basketball match, and it scared the living daylights out of Mark Kennedy, and he realised we have to be more defensively sound, and then we went further and further and further towards that. So, in terms of the identity that the club would like us to have, I don't think it was ever had the intention of being what it turned into. That's just kind of what we did it to steady the ship. It worked in terms of results. It wasn't pretty, but we can't deny it worked, and it allowed us to achieve what we achieved. And I think we maybe doubled down a little bit on that in some of the signings in the summer because we had Mark Kennedy in charge and we had a desire to progress with that style, but maybe make it a slightly more forward thinking. But we had that more robust style of player. And I think now we're maybe just trying to take that step back towards that initial vision that we stuck away from, rather than kind of ripping everything up and starting again. I think we're just trying to just reset back to what the intention was at the point of hiring Mark Kennedy, to be honest. But hopefully with a bit more success and a bit more kind of longevity in that style. But it's going to be a gradual process ultimately.
No, absolutely. I think very much on that point, there are a couple of players. I'm not going to sort of specify any particular player because I may be very much wrong in this anyway, but I think there are a couple of players that were maybe more suited to a Mark Kennedy style than maybe a Michael Skubala style. But at the same time, there's going to be players that are more suited to a Michael Skubala style than a Mark Kennedy style. And I think the first player that we can very much pick out on that is TJ Omer, because let's just, discuss how he has changed so much under Michael Skubala, because he's back to playing this kind of ball playing role that he clearly possesses the skills for. So look, there are players that are going to benefit from the change of management. There are players that won't. Liam Scully, for the record, guys, has put out a post on Vitals last night, I think. Please go and read it if you haven't already, because it's just really brilliant and transparent from a CEO that, let's be honest, he gets a lot of stick. That it is a bit of a Marmite kind of. I really feel. I very, very much agree with you. But I think he's kind of this Marmite figure in the fan base. But I think a lot of that is just sometimes it is just people wanting somebody to blame, and I get that, but I also think it is a little bit unfair. And then when you read through how transparent he's trying to be, and he says at one point, look, we made missteps over the past 20 months. We've made mistakes that we're now trying to work back and rectify. And like you were just alluding to there, Chris, it's not major things that are going to have to be changed, but there's just a couple of little points that are going to have to be altered in certain ways, and that's fine. Every football club has to do that. I'd much prefer to be in a position as we are rather than a Fleetwood who are now going into their third manager of the season, for example. So it's just about this continuity. It's not always going to be keeping the exact same style and always being the exact same, just with a new head coach. We're happy to have a different style of play. In fact, we probably want a different style of play, let alone just be happy with it. And that is still a good thing, because we are going to be able to recruit for this. And yes, okay, we are maybe going to have to get a couple of different players in than players who might have done under Mark Kennedy. But again, that isn't always a bad thing. And I'm kind of just losing my point. All I'm saying is we are okay. We're going into January. We are going to be making changes. It's fine. And I think on that note, Chris, let's move straight on now. Little heads up. For those that watch every week, you might get very confused when the transition starts in a second. Normally, we would go straight to our best 11s. But what we're going to do is we're just going to change things around ever so slightly today. And we're going to go straight to the tactics board first, because there's a few things that we need to discuss. And as promised, here is the tactics board on screen. Now, I alluded to the fact that we did have a bit to talk about, Chris. And for those eagle-eyed viewers, they may already notice one of the biggest things that we need to talk about. Now, I'm just going to preface this with, we do not know anything that anybody else doesn't know, but this is purely speculation and maybe what we would like to see going forward rather than what we are expecting necessarily. I mean, I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I thought it was going to happen in December. It didn't. But this is just something that we would now like to see. So, Chris, talk us through why we haven't got a 3-4-3 on our screens.
Well, I feel that this is just a really big opportunity and a good opportunity to move to what I perceive to be Michael Skubala's preferred system and style. Not necessarily a 4-3-3, but certainly a back four, and then maybe a 4-4-2, maybe a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. But ultimately, I think the big shift is from a back three to a back four. Michael Skubala, for the evidence that we have, which of course we haven't got evidence of every single game he's ever managed in his managerial and coaching career, but a lot of the evidence that we have suggests that he prefers a back four. And I have to admit, in the times this season where we have switched to a back four during game, I think we've looked at our most threatening. So with the players who are going to be unavailable for the coming weeks, I think a 4-3-3 suits us, but that can quite easily shift into a 4-2-3-1 as well. Of course, that could be quite fluid. Bolton do the same sort of shape with their midfield, albeit playing a 3-5-2, but they still have a three-man midfield. They have kind of a hybrid three, where sometimes it's a 6 and 2 8s, and sometimes it's 2 deeper and 1 10. And that can be with the same makeup of players. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a back four, a midfield three, and a front three. This led us into kind of when we were discussing what our best 11 or preferred 11s going into January would be. I think this is kind of where my head just went. I think it suits the squad that's available currently. I think it's a first step towards what Michael Skubala would like us to be doing long term. And with the players that are currently unavailable, I think it lends us to probably naming our strongest 11 or strongest available 11 with this system. So yeah, I think we're going to probably be talking quite a lot tactically coming up over the next coming months in regards to how do we play in possession, out possession. If we do change to this, it's going to be a big change from our 3-4-3 shape. Some of the principles may shift slightly. I can expect us to have a bit more of the ball in this regard. But ultimately, I think how we line up with it's the back line. The back line's the big one. The back line's the big one. It's not a back 5 or 3. It's now going to be a 4. That's my opinion. Like you said, mate, we don't know anything. We don't know this is definitely going to happen. I just feel that this is probably suits us now with where we're at squad wise, and also the fact that we've got January upcoming and we know we're going to try and sign players that are going to fit and more of Michael Skubala style. That's that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I very much do kind of agree. I don't know. I'm weirdly kind of sat on the fence because I don't actually expect us to be making too many moves in January, if I'm honest. I think the club kind of obviously when they put out the board minutes recently, they said there's not necessarily a massive budget there. I expect us to fill up the couple of loan spots. Whether or not we still have Jack Vale after January, whether or not Freddie Draper's in after January, we can very much guess at these sorts of things, but we don't know. But I do probably agree that.
But I think we should guess.
Yeah.
I would be surprised to see Jack Vale here at the end of January. Personally, I think with the deficiencies we've had up top this season, if he's not getting starts, there's no point having him around the squad. If there's clearly something that doesn't quite fit there, he would be playing week in, week out in League One if he fitted the system and the style and was what he wanted. No disrespect to Joven, but you would surely be playing someone of a perceived higher quality than Joven, a bit more experienced and would play at a higher level. And the fact that Jack has come on loan and he's not starting those games, Pax is playing ahead of him and Joven's playing ahead of him. That would indicate to me that maybe Jack probably won't be here. I don't know, but that would indicate to me that's likely. We'll talk about Freddie in a little bit. I don't expect us to go and spend hundreds of thousands of pounds in January, but I do expect us to add players to the squad. I also expect to see a couple of outgoings, as I mentioned. Maybe that'd be loan players going back, maybe a couple of permanent signings going out. We don't know any of this, but I do expect a little bit of churn. I don't think overhaul, but I do think a bit of churn. I think one or two additions in key areas would really help us out. Really help us out. We all know the obvious one, don't we? The centre forward, but I think there's a little bit more to it than that.
I definitely agree, and actually, I think it's going to be these two positions, your left and right wing, that are actually going to be pretty big in terms of the second half of this season. I think the midfield three, that we already know that there will be two players that have 100% start as much as they're fit and sort of away from suspension. That those two will start, and that is the two Ethans. And they're going to be able to make up this. Now, we'll go to best 11s in a minute, so I don't really want to jump ahead too much. But if we are saying we're going to move to something like this and we've got the two Ethans in, now personally, I would then prefer to have it more as a 4-3-3 rather than obviously the 4-2-3-1 that you discussed,
Agreed.
Chris, sort of with two back and one there, purely because Ethan Hamilton is absolutely fantastic on the ball. Now, I'm not saying that Ethan Erraghan isn't. I think Ethan Erraghan is very much the more defensive-minded of the two. And I would love to see an Ethan Hamilton in one of those kind of 8 roles that gives him a little bit more license.
I agree.
Granted,
totally.
he may get that next to Ethan Erraghan in some games, but I think in away games, for example, against some of the top teams, if we're getting pushed back, he's going to find himself sat in a deeper DM role too much. And it's, for me, a little bit of a wasted position for him because we want to see him get on the ball.
I think this really
pushing forward.
This really suits him because it's best of both worlds, isn't it? Because obviously recently we've seen him in that more attacking line. And I understand the reason why. I completely get it, personally, because we haven't got anyone else. But also, I think his pressing is excellent. He's really aggressive and he's a strong runner. So I understood why Scoot Barlow maybe tried him in that higher up the pitch. But I thought we missed his combative kind of nature slightly deeper.
Yeah.
I think it added a bit more reliance on Ethan Erraghan. I think maybe it took a little bit away from Erraghan to have the stability of Hamilton partnering him. So this 4-3-3, I feel, with Erraghan sitting deeper and kind of being the water carrier, if you like, and then Hamilton having that license to kind of basically be a box-to-box midfielder, which is just that all-energy midfielder. And then we've got the guy on the other side now. As the squad stands at the moment, we've got the option between Ted and Ali Smith. Ted's been really good actually since he's come back in the team, but he can't get through 90 minutes. And this would actually suit Ali Smith down to the ground. It's actually probably the first time all season he's played in a position that we class as natural. He's also a box-to-box midfielder. Arrives in the box late. That's what he did brilliantly for Sutton last year. He was kind of a box crushing centre midfielder, arriving late and kept the ball simple when he had the ball at his feet, but he was all action up and down the pitch with a real license to get forward. But he was coming forward from deep rather than starting in that more advanced position. And, you know, those two box-to-box midfielders there, or Ted playing when you need a bit more of that kind of control, I think this really suits us nicely here. More so than the 4-2-3-1 does, particularly with Danny Mandrew not available for a few games.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but the wide players, I think you're absolutely right. They're key here. Of course, Dylan Duffy, this will suit massively. He's natural winger.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is probably up for a little bit of debate in terms of what we have. We've got Moreland coming in, Rico coming back, Lass can play there. But I think maybe that will be an area that we'd look to recruit in possibly. But interesting nonetheless.
No, that's certainly interesting times ahead, and I think we'll get a much clearer picture as to, first of all, whether we are playing this formation in the second half of the season, but also if we are, who fits where. We'll get a much clearer picture, I think, in next month's monthly show. But for now, Chris, let's go straight into our best 11s and discuss who we've picked. So here it is on screen, the best 11. Now, little caveat, me and Chris have gone with the same one, sort of. We have. There is only one best 11 you will see. There are quite a few little caveats that we'll kind of break down one by one. But just to start off, we've got Lucas Jensen in goal, TJ Omer right back, Sean Rowan left back, Adam Jackson and Alex Mitchell as the two centre halves. Ethan Arahan sitting as that 6, with Hamilton and Bishop as the 8s. Sorensen right wing, Duffy left wing, Draper up top. Now, obviously, this is the reason why we wanted to do the tactics board first, because we have done our best 11 in a 4-3-3. We just, like I said, the idea of the best 11s, when we kind of sat down and decided how we were going to be working through the monthly show, the idea of the best 11 was that it's the 11 that you would be happy to start every single match in the upcoming month. Hence why, obviously, Danny Mandrew and Paudie O'Connor we ruled as not available. Rico Hackett, we deemed him not to be available just because we don't know when he's coming back. Obviously, there was speculation probably 2 weeks ago now that it was going to be 3-4 weeks, but we can't guarantee that he'll be in for 3 or 4 of the matches in January or anything like that. So we decided not to include him either. Jack Moylan. Jack Moylan is obviously a player who we're going to see from the 2nd of January, not available against Blackpool, but we're going to see him sort of later on in the month. Didn't include him purely based off the fact we don't really have anything to judge on, really. So hopefully he's put a stamp on the squad so that we can put him in. But at the minute we decided not to. And Freddie Draper, obviously a player who is not currently at the club. Again, I don't think we'd be able to recall him by Blackpool anyway. But even if, obviously the idea behind us putting him in, it kind of just stops any beating around the bush. It says we want Freddie Draper to come back and lead our line. So look, Chris, I've kind of just gone through a few of the caveats, but why don't you talk me through why you chose this team?
Well, let's do the big one first. Let's talk about Freddie Draper. We both of us clearly are in favour of recalling him. I think it's now needs must. I think it's more important to have him in the squad than not. He's done superbly at Walsall. That first half of the season has served the purpose. It's done exactly what we hoped it would. He performed brilliantly for Drogheda, sorry. Basically beat up the hot entire division when he went there. And he's gone into League Two and basically done exactly the same. He's not just a goal scorer. He is a goal scorer, which helps. But he's not just a goal scorer. He's a real aggressive focal point, got really good link-up play. He got another assist, by the way, on Friday night. Back heel through to, I think it was Hutchinson, not sure. But yeah, ball came into him, held up a defender, edge of the box sort of area, back to goal, little back heel through to his teammate, goal. And he scored a header on Boxing Day. The guy's brilliant. Like, it's everything that we've been missing. And I feel so conscious about kind of pinning all my hopes on him. And I don't want to put the pressure on Freddie. But all the evidence that we have is that he's absolutely ready to play up and start. Key. There's no point bringing him back if he's not going to be a starting player. So he's ready to play. I think he's ready to play and start in League One for us. And he has the attributes that we require from a lone striker: aggressive, physical, extremely good at holding up play, can finish. He's got a goal scorer's instinct. Of course, there's always things he can polish. I think some of his link-up play can be polished, but ultimately, I think he's going to be despite his tender age, I think he'll be an upgrade on everyone that's currently available for us up there. So it seems stupid not to. So that's the first one for me. I think it'll be a debate that kind of rages on for a while until a decision is made by the club. But I'll be honest, even since probably late September, early October, I've been of the opinion that we should be bringing him back, and I think that opinion has only become stronger since then. So that's the big one, I suppose. And I've then gone for Dylan Duffy, who I think whenever he's come on in his natural kind of attacking wide position, so when he played wing back against Cambridge, he almost played as a winger. He played so high up the pitch. I thought he was superb then. When he's come on in flashes, he had a man of natural performance, and then we haven't really seen him too much since then. But I don't think our current shape really suits him. When he plays wing back against a stronger team, his one-on-one defending is clearly not good enough to deal with that, and that's not no fault of his own. He's not a wing back. But excuse me, I think a natural kind of winger, and he could easily play on the right and cut inside, by the way, if needs to be. That can change during the game, but ultimately in that front line is where Dylan Duffy needs to be. And then we've both chosen Lass as the right winger. I think that's more a case of availability rather than that's his best position. I actually think long term, I think his best position will be a really forward-thinking right back in a 4. But of course, as it stands right now, he's been effective when he's played in that higher line, and I think until players come into the team, Hackett being available again, more than of course potentially coming in, we don't know yet what he's like. I think Lass, in terms of the evidence that we have, would be who I would choose to be in that front line, and the rest of it kind of picks itself in terms of availability. Really, I think what's worth pointing out though is that as much as I don't think it would suit us as much, this 11 would still fit our current 3-4-3 shape with a back three of TJ, Mitchell and Jacko, Rowan and Sorensen as the wing backs, Irahan and Hamilton and as the sixes, Bishop and Duffy as the 10s. Of course, it's more kind of square pegs in round holes that way, but I think it has been ever since, has been for the majority of the season. So this 11 players, I think, could actually shift shapes in game without needing to make a substitution. So yeah, that's mine and ours. But I don't know if there are any other caveats you wanted to touch on there.
So yeah, I just want to pick up on sort of a couple of things there. I think first of all, Freddie Draper. Now, Freddie Draper, I have changed my mind about 10 different times over the course of the first half of this season as to whether or not we do or don't bring back Freddie Draper. But at the end of the day, I think our hand has been forced. We didn't like it when Forest did it to us with Tyler Walker, for example. Yes, okay, granted, different circumstances, but it's kind of the same principle that at the time they weren't going to go out and spend, I think the person at the top of their shortlist was sort of £5 million at the time. They're not going to go and spend that when they've got Tyler Walker, who scored, 16 goals in the first half of that season? Something like that, if I remember correctly. They could just bring him back. We're in the same position with Freddie Draper. We need a striker. And Freddie has already got 10 goals in 18 League Two matches. Now, I was in a discussion with somebody on Twitter recently, and they kind of said, oh, yes, but look, you can take out if you take out his hat-trick, then, he's only scored 7 in those games. I'm like, well, okay. You can take out his hat-trick if that helps you manipulate the stats. That's fine. But that's still 18 goals in 46 League Two matches. If there's a 19-year-old in League Two scoring 18 goals, we'd be turning around and saying that player was out of our price range. And this is very much the point. We have got the opportunity here to have a top-level striker come into our team. And obviously, hopefully, he can very much take that step up. And I think the biggest sort of turning point for me, and the point where I realised he would be able to make the step up, was, funnily enough, the hat-trick. That hat-trick he scored against Newport, wasn't it, on a Friday night away there. He got all 3 goals in a 3-3 draw. And the 3 goals were so different, but they were all typical strikers' goals. One of them was a one-on-one with the keeper that he managed to tuck away. The other one was sort of tapping in from a low cross from the edge of the box. And the other one was he sort of managed to turn it in from a scramble in the box. I think there was a corner, it came back out, went back in, and there was a bit of a scramble in the box, and he managed to tap it in to get his hat-trick. For me, those 3 goals are the exact example of the three things that we're currently missing at Lincoln City. We don't necessarily get into one-on-one opportunities, but even when we do, I don't know if we've necessarily got the quality to be able to tuck them away. We also don't really seem to be scoring goals from scrambles in the box, because a poacher's instinct, like what Freddie Draper quite clearly has, is exactly what I think we're missing at times. And also, how many times have we played the ball along the ground into the box and unfortunately nobody's been there? Now, I understand that a striker isn't the sole thing that we need. We obviously do need to improve our chance creation. But I think I'd like to think you'd agree, Chris, that chance creation is improved when you've got a striker, because those that are creating the chances, you know, in this position, this formation, for example, your wingers or your 2-8s, for example, they're much more willing to put the ball into the box when they've confident that there's someone in there that could turn that ball into the back of the net. That's what Freddie Draper will be able to bring. How many times have we got to the 20, 25-yard mark out and we have to turn back? That's not just because the players that are out on the wing or whoever's in that position for us at the minute are lazy or they just want to pass backwards or anything like this. No, it's just the fact that unfortunately we are missing that focal point. If we've got a striker running on that's always willing to have that ball go over the top or along the ground or be chopped into the middle of the box or whatever it might be, we've got that. I think we'd have created so many more chances and good quality chances, because we can get the ball up to that position, as we've spoken about for weeks and weeks on the podcast. We can get the ball up to that position. It's just the next part that we're currently struggling with. Freddie Draper, for me, he can fix that. So, yeah, I just really wanted to sort of reiterate that point. Also, I'm not necessarily a fan of the two centre-halves. If we were to move to a back four, to have Jacko and Alex Mitchell as our two centre-halves. The only reason I'm saying that is I feel like under Michael Skubala, we're going to want more ball players. So therefore, I would, for example, prefer Jacko on one side and TJ Omer, for example, on the right side. But then the problem is then we've got a hole at right back. Do you bring Sorensen back there? I think in the future, yes. But then we've got a hole at right wing. Who can we play there? Don't really think we've got anybody at the minute, as much as we obviously hope that Jack Moreland can fill in there. We hope that Rico's coming back soon. I think we're going to have a totally different best 11 come the end of January, but I still think it's going to be based on the exact same principles that we're currently talking about. Just that at the minute, we are just having to sort of suit everybody. And I think this is the best way to do it going forward. I think this is the best possible available 11. Although, obviously, I do very much hope that there are certain changes in the near future. But I think this is very much a team that we can pick up results with. But like I say, I am also then hopeful of a few more changes, people coming back, people impressing that have just come in, Jack Morgan, for example, and maybe a couple of players we're bringing in the transfer window to very much change this over the course of January. But yeah, I think this is probably the best that we've got at the moment.
Yeah, cool. I can't disagree with anything you've just said there, mate. To be honest, I think the big discussion for anyone that's discussing this will be Freddie Draper. I think we've discussed that now quite a lot. I think one person that's worth pointing out here is actually the inclusion of Sean Rowan. We've both included Sean Rowan here, probably for the first time for a number of months, to be honest. And he certainly didn't feature in the previous best 11 because he hadn't played under Skubala, and we just felt like we need to be kind of evidence-based in selecting this, and he hadn't played under Skubala. He hadn't had the opportunity to play under Skubala, so we couldn't really judge him. I think at the time, this time last month, I certainly would have still preferred him to be an outside centre-half in a back three rather than a wing-back in a back five, for the reasons that we've discussed before, of course. And there were just other people ahead of him in the system because of good performances. But I think a back four suits him. I think is probably his long-term position. If we are going to play a back four, will be left back rather than left centre half. Though he certainly is capable of playing that left centre half in a three. I think those two are his positions, almost like the opposite of a TJ, really, who is kind of outside centre half in a three, or a kind of conservative right back on the right hand side of a four. But I think what's worth pointing out about Sean is I've actually been quite impressed with him since he's come back into the team. His first game was a little bit rusty, but I actually thought he was our man of the match against Northampton. I thought he was really, really good. I think his one-on-one defending was superb, which of course is even more important as a left back in a four when you're going to be one-on-one against a winger all the time. When you're in a wing back, sometimes you're doing it against their fullback, sometimes you're doing it against their winger, sometimes it's the outside centre half that takes that role depending on the game state in the situation. In a back four, you're pretty much always going to be one-on-one against the attacking winger. And I think he's got a real strength for one-on-one defending, Sean has. So Yeah, I think that suits him, but I just think it's worth pointing out. I think he's been good since he's come back in under Skubala, and there's actually been getting better and better, particularly against Northampton. I thought he was really good against Northampton. I just thought it was interesting that both of us actually chose to put Sean in without really discussing him in much depth at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sean Rowan is a really, really good player. Bear in mind, he's only 20 years old. I think my key thing with Sean is I just hope that he improves his consistency over time. But at the same time, I can very much kind of understand a lot of it with Sean Rowan because he's been played at left wing back, which isn't his natural position. Left centre half in a back three, which, I mean, I think that's probably his better position. But he's been kind of played in a few of those different positions in that area of the pitch. And he's probably been given so many different instructions in sort of different areas. Obviously, a Mark Kennedy left wing back is totally different to a Michael Skubala left wing back, for example, and left centre half in each of those is also. So I think Sean Rowan's definitely got a bit of a future in this team long term over the next sort of couple of years. We know he signed a 2-year contract in the summer, and I very much am looking forward to seeing him kick on. And I think he's probably the best player that we've got for that position, especially at the minute. So yeah, look, those are the best 11s. I think there are definitely obviously points of contention in there, and I understand that. And I think even that I'm sat here sort of second guessing myself with some of these positions, but at the same time, I just think at the minute with what's available, this is probably the best option moving forward. So look, we've spoken about a number of different players there, Chris. Why don't we now have a little look at who the player of the months were for the month of December? And here we go. The first player of the month on the screen is the one that has been chosen by you guys, the readers on the staceywest.net. Yeah, you chose Ethan Hamilton with a 6.83 rating. Now, it is worth noting that Alex Mitchell also received a 6.83 rating, but this was given to Ethan Hamilton purely based on the fact he has played more minutes, more matches than what Alex Mitchell has. But very much credit and such goes to Alex Mitchell as well. Now, Chris, we've picked somebody else who we'll go to in a second. But can you understand people picking Ethan Hamilton?
Totally understand. Yeah. You know what? I think I'm maybe a little bit guilty of taking what Ethan Hamilton does for granted a little bit, to be honest. I think when I come to pick a player of the month, I often kind of think who's performed above expectation, or who's been kind of super consistent. And I think I just come to expect it from Ethan now because he's been superb once again. I just love his energy. I think he adds so much to our midfield, and I think I like him. I'd like him as like a 3-8 or like an attack or a 6 next to Irahan, but still having the license to get forward. I think he's better, as much as I understand why he's played higher up the pitch and started in that higher up position recently. I think he's better coming from deep and driving from deep and getting us up the pitch as like an extra player to cause an overload rather than just starting up there. His pressing is great wherever he plays. But yeah, totally understand why he's been chosen by the readers. Yeah, it's hard to disagree, really. Like I say, I think I've just taken for granted a little bit, which I feel a little bit guilty about.
Yeah, I could probably agree. And I actually think it's sort of the same with Ethan Irahan as well. We very much did that at times. And I think Ethan Hamilton, he gets praised on every single monthly show. He gets praised on every single podcast. And there's a reason for that. So I wouldn't be, although I haven't necessarily chosen him myself, as you haven't, Chris, I definitely don't think it's a bad choice from you guys. Okay, our choice then, Chris. We both went for the same player, TJ Omer. Tell me why.
Hasn't put a foot wrong since he's played under Michael Skubala. I think it's ironic, isn't it, that might not be the right word, but it's just strange that in a month where we've lost 3 games in a row and only picked up 2 points, we've chosen another centre back as we have for the last few weeks, last months. But I just think TJ has really grown into Michael Skubala's team. I think he's become super consistent, which, let's be honest, that's probably the only real criticism that we've been able to kind of point in Aoma's direction historically. The season under Mike Appleton that we got to the playoffs, he was unbelievably good at right back in a 4. Since then, he's probably been a bit inconsistent. He's either been brilliant or he's struggled. And I feel like he's a bit of a confidence player. When he's confident, he seems to play fantastically. But maybe when he isn't, things have seemed to maybe go awry a little bit. And I think he's just, since Marcus Kubala, we've seen a confident and we've seen a consistent TJ Ioma, who it's been an absolute delight to see. To have to admit, it's been fantastic to see, and I think he's just continued that in the month of December, despite other players around him and the results maybe not going in our favour. When he's played, he hasn't really put a foot wrong once again, and I think that just deserved kind of noting, really. And yeah, for me, that's why I've chosen him as my player of the month.
No, absolutely, and I very much echo those thoughts. I think, realistically, with TJ Ioma, he's probably the most improved player under Marcus Kubala. And, yes, okay, some of that is probably system, and the system definitely does benefit TJ Ioma, but he's also got to have taken that opportunity, by the horns and gone with it, and he very much has. I think he's really impressed. I'm very much looking forward to see what the second half of the season has in store for TJ Ioma, and I think, personally, he very much deserves this kind of player of the month accolade, because I think he has still managed to impress in a side that has struggled overall in the month of December. I think, when you look at, for example, the readers' votes, Ethan Hamilton winning on a 6.83. It's not exactly the highest of scores for a player of the month, but I still think there is a huge sort of amount of credit that has to go to some of the players on the team. In fact, a lot of the players on the team. Absolutely. Right. Chris, we've spoken about the doom and gloom of December. We've spoken about the best 11s and the tactics and what could change moving forward. Why don't we have a look at which games those changes should come in for? And there we go. On the screen, the January League One fixtures. Well, I say League One, that is the only competition we're still in. Obviously, we have got the break for FA Cup third round weekend, which would have been the 6th of January. We would have been playing Shrewsbury, but we are no longer. Now, the first game of the month comes, tomorrow as we're recording this. I'm currently sat in my hotel room in Blackpool, so I hope we're still playing Blackpool tomorrow. That is obviously Blackpool away, followed by a 12-day break before Wycombe away, then Derby at home and Peterborough at home. Why? What a lovely month. Just what a lovely month. Like, Chris, look, let's talk Blackpool first, because we've just said it off air. May have even mentioned it earlier on. I've said it that much actually over the last few days. I don't know. Blackpool, for me, it's a write-off. I'm currently, like I say, I'm sat in my hotel room in Blackpool. It's peeing it down with rain. I'm expecting us to lose tomorrow, and I'm just sat here thinking, what the hell am I doing?
Happy New Year!
Yeah. Hey, yeah.
But yeah, I echo that. I fully expect us to get beaten by Blackpool. We are patched up at the moment, and we haven't had any opportunity to get players back yet. Freddie Draper won't be eligible for this game. You can't recall him for this one. So even if we would like him back for the rest of January, he can't play against Blackpool, I don't think. They're just better than we are at the moment, and they have got a lot more available players than we have at the moment. And Marcus Kubala hasn't had the opportunity. He said we had 26, 27 training sessions. He's only been able to have 2 training sessions on actual tactical stuff, which is all about implementing new ideas. The rest of it's just been match prep or match recovery. And that isn't changing for the Blackpool game. We mentioned we expect to see a shape change eventually, and probably expect to see it in January, but I don't expect to see it for the 1st of January. I don't expect to see us change shape against Blackpool at all. I imagine it's going to be same as, and we need to be a bit pragmatic here, and we need to just do our best to stay in the game. I'll be honest, I fully expect us to lose this, and I'm pretty sure the majority of League of Six supporters expect us to lose this. I just hope that we don't have the same sort of reaction that we had to losing against, say, Bolton and Derby, where we went into games that we expected to lose, did lose, yet a lot of people were angry about it. We all know the situation we're in. Blackpool away is a bit of a write-off, I agree. And anything we can get out of that will be a bonus. For me, the big, huge game this month is the Wycombe game, because we've got 12 days between Blackpool and Wycombe. Michael Skubala, for the first time since he's been at the club, will have the chance to really implement a bit of style into his trainings, do some specific tactical development with the squad, and really start to implement his ideas. It will take more than 12 days for us to polish it, but it's the first time he's had any sort of stretch of time to really start to implement elements of that. Almost like a mini pre-season in that regard, isn't it? So it's for this game that I expect to see some changes in lineup. Expect to see some changes in system. Maybe expect to see some changes in terms of personnel as well. But more than anything, expect to see changes in style. I think this is really the game where we start to see, okay, this is the beginnings of what a Michael Skubala team looks like. The optimistic Lincoln City supporter says that's actually where I think we're going to pick up some points. I actually think we could win that game. If things go to plan with a week on the training ground, well, over a week, almost 2 weeks on the training ground, I really feel that's where we're going to have the opportunity to really push on and start to implement what Michael Skubala is really all about. But then we've got Derby and Peterborough, both at home, which is great. But they're two excellent teams. Peterborough are a fantastic side. We actually had a higher XG than them away, but only because they missed a couple of sitters. But I actually still thought they dominated the game away and deserved the win. Derby, actually, I thought we was unlucky to lose, despite maybe deserving to narrowly lose the game. They're at home, but our home record isn't quite as dominant as it was this time last year, sadly. So I think how I go into those two games will depend very much on how we do against Wickham, to be honest.
Yeah.
My prediction for this month is 3 points. I think we'll beat Wickham. Hopefully, I think we'll lose to Blackpool. And I probably expect us to narrowly lose to Peterborough and Derby, just because I think their squads are better than ours at the moment in terms of overall quality and also depth. And they're both on decent form, Peterborough particularly. So we've been talking about how the longer term looks more positive, and we start to think that we could have a late run, not necessarily to the playoffs, but certainly a late run to some positive results. I think maybe that's February onwards rather than like picking up loads of points in January. I think we can. Yeah, I'm going to predict 3 points and Wickham, but I think the game that I'm really reserving a lot of my judgment on, and again, understanding it's still going to take a lot longer than just that week or 10 days on the training ground. But I think that'll be the first time we start to see a real glimpse of what we're going to be looking like going forward. So yeah, Wickham's a really, really, really big game for me, not just because of points, and I think that's where we've got a chance of taking some, but actually more about development and more about style and system. I think if we're going to see a change, that's when we're most likely to see one, basically.
No, I very, very much agree with that. And actually, a little bit of a point as well in terms of Peterborough, one that I've actually only just remembered myself. They play Leeds, I believe, at home in the third round of the FA Cup. If they win that, which wouldn't be too surprised the way that Peterborough are playing at the minute and the fact they are at home, that our game on the 27th will be postponed. So there is a chance that we've not only got a 10, 12-day period at the start of the month, we could also have a 2-week period at the end of the month as well on the training pitch to try and sort of improve and change style or whatever. So there is actually an opportunity, a big opportunity for us in January to sort of move forward very much on the training pitch, both at the start of the month and potentially again at the end of the month as well. Now, I very much agree with you in terms of the points. I'm going to go for 4 points based on the fact that providing all 4 games are being played. Just because I do think we'll beat Wickham away. That is a mixture between, I think, us obviously potentially changing its style. I think even if we don't, I don't really think Wickham aren't exactly the greatest side. They lost to Exeter last week. Exeter, who have only picked up 3 points since the start of September or something crazy like that. They beat Wickham. I just don't necessarily think that Wickham are the greatest side at the minute. Obviously, Derby, Peterborough, Blackpool. As much as I'm very much expecting to lose against Blackpool, I would just like to hope that in one of those 3 games we'll pick up a point. I'm saying that maybe a little bit too optimistically, but I'm also saying that in terms of balance of probability. 2 home game days.
It's not too optimistic, and even those games that we've lost, we haven't, like we said earlier, we haven't been played off the pitch really. We've lost tight games, so it's not like they're streets ahead of us. We're just we'll just come out on the wrong side of some tight results. And like I said, both Bolton and Derby probably on the balance of play deserved to win the games, but they didn't deserve to win 3-0, for example. They deserve to come out on the positive side of a really tight game. But when a game's that tight and XG hovering between 0.5 and just over 1 for both teams on most of those games, it can go either way, can't it, really? So, I think I'm hopeful that we can get a point from somewhere else, but I think 3 is probably my realistic one. But let's be honest, the one that's key for us is Wickham, isn't it? I think that's the real, that's the line in the sand for me. Or the first line in the sand, really under microscope, where we can go, right, let's just see what's different here. Not expecting miracles, not expecting it to be completely different and, us to play like Brazil. But I would be hopeful of seeing some changes and some developments there because, his strength is in coaching and development. So let's see some coaching and development. It's the first chance he's had to get that time on the training pitch. So I'll just be excited. It's not kind of judgmental, but just excited to see what it will look like, or what the first stages of it would look like. So big month. I do feel February onwards is probably where we're going to start to see as really pick up, and that's where my hope lies, and still my deep down kind of positivity and optimism of long term we're absolutely fine. We're on the right path. But there's no denying that the short term, it's pretty tough, isn't it? It is pretty tough, and it doesn't get any easier in January, sadly.
January is always a really difficult month because, that all the games are kind of sometimes actually a little bit in the background because the transfer window is very much at the forefront of everything. It's the same as what an August is like. It doesn't matter how early we get our business done in January. We could have most of it done by the 12th of January, for example, just before Wickham. But there's still going to be changes that will be made in the second half of the month. There's still an opportunity for players to kind of adapt if we're getting them maybe from another league or things like that. If we make major changes, I think we'll make some. Don't necessarily expect it to be major. But look, those are the fixtures. At the end of the day, Chris, it's not exactly been the easiest month of December, has it? But
it has.
There are plenty of silver linings. The long-term progress of this football club is still going in the right direction. And I think that's the key point that we have to take away from this. Look, I already mentioned Liam's post that he put out on Vitals last night. I think any of the abuse aimed at him or Harvey or any of the players or anything like that, it is just getting a little bit silly. I think everybody just sometimes needs to take a little bit of a step back. Think about where we are. We're sat mid-table in League One, and I understand that people want to be higher. Trust me, I want to see us get to the Championship soon. And don't get me wrong, the way I see it, we're going to be in the Championship a heck of a lot sooner than what we'll be in League Two. So we are in a really good position. We're still progressing. It isn't an overnight progress. We are, we have got excuses in terms of our lack of strikers, in terms of some of the injuries, and that's not
explanations, Charlie. They're explanations.
They are, but it's not anybody's fault. We weren't sat here at the end of August talking about how unprepared we are going into the season. Okay, we were praising our squad depth. The fact that just hasn't quite worked out, that's nobody's fault. There's no major corruption issue here. Everybody, let's just understand where we are. Let's look forward to the months ahead. Right off Blackpool, doesn't matter. And I can't wait to be doing this again at the end of January and then again at the end of February, just to be able to talk through some of the changes, hopefully a few changes that we've made. Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
It's been a pleasure as always, mate. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everyone watching.
Happy New Year, everyone. Enjoy. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.